AMT. Welcome to Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30. Tonight, clips from the new movie, Giuliani Time. Did you ever see this clip of Rudy from the City Hall Press Corps comedy show, The Inner Circle? Take that, Jerry Falwell. Also tonight, the new chairman of the New York City Education Committee, Robert Jackson, on parental involvement and cell phones in the schools. And we continue our web video series this week where scary safety videos meet scary car commercials and ninjas for net neutrality. But we begin tonight with the movie Giuliani Time and director Kevin Keating. As America's mayor decides whether to try to become America's president, this unflattering new film remembers the Rudy of September 10th. Here's an excerpt.
To the station house, he was taken to a bathroom, he was disrobed, all right, and a blunt object was placed in his anus. That punctured his intestine and damaged his bladder.
And you were naked?
They took your pants off and took you to the bathroom?
Yes, that was two of them. One pick up something in the floor, I don't know what it is, but it looked like a plunger to me. I could identify only one of them. He tell me, if I talk to anyone about what he done to me, he'll kill me and he'll kill everybody in my family.
An officer would have to be a lunatic to believe that he could get away with what Volpe did to Luima. And yet, he apparently, and several others around him, thought that they could get away with it. They thought we're in our own house, the police station, and within a locked beyond the locked bathroom door within that police station. Who's going to know? Who's going to tell? We can always claim that he was injured some other way. Not that most officers are the kind of monster that Volpe turned out to be, but simply the general feeling that nobody is really watching us.
These allegations are shocking. If they are true and substantiated, then they should result in the dismissal of these police officers, and they also should result in these police officers receiving substantial terms of imprisonment.
The Luima incident came up in the middle of the '97 campaign, and it could have turned into a disaster for him, and he handled it pretty well. You know, he didn't get defensive about his record on police brutality. He acknowledged that that was an incident of police brutality and said we're going to investigate it and deal with it. Whether he ultimately dealt with it adequately or not is a different question. And in fact, during our campaign, the Post wrote an editorial that I thought crystallized it perfectly well. There was a charge floating around during the Luima incident that the police officers had uttered the phrase, "It's Giuliani time."
And there's the title reference, Giuliani Time. Let's meet the director, Kevin Keating. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Brian.
Do you want to expand or finish that thought, which kind of got clipped there?
Yeah, I think Evan Mandery went on to explain that editorial that was titled Giuliani Time in the New York Post was basically a further elaboration on a concept that had been infusing itself throughout the city, but it had different meanings in different communities. My experience has been, and we did not title the film, the title of the film did not come from the Abner Luima accusation that was later retracted. It came from a feeling that I discovered was widely felt in communities of color and communities throughout the city, the operative phrase, "It's Giuliani time." I've talked to journalists who told me they witnessed New York police officers use that phrase in the course of an arrest, a street arrest. Another journalist, excuse me, Mark Riley, said he had an encounter with a policeman and heard that phrase being used. So it was not unknown to many, many, many people throughout the city, and that's really what we are trying to evoke here, that it was an atmosphere, and it has little or nothing to do with the actual Luima incident.
But just before we get off the title, Giuliani Time, we talked about this on the radio on WNYC this morning, but is it irresponsible to use Giuliani Time as the title of your film and not make clear that when Abner Luima said that one of the cops who assaulted him said it was Giuliani time, that was a lie, that was never uttered, that Luima took back that statement?
Well, he took back I understand he retracted that statement in testimony with his court case some years later. I don't know if it's irresponsible, as I say. I don't know if I should. As Evan Mandry said, it was a charge that was floating around at the time. I think that's as far as we could take it, because we didn't talk to Abner Louima, nor did we speak to anyone else in particular about that charge.
All right. We'll see some more clips from the film. But tell our viewers, what's the main point of this movie?
The main point of the movie is that I think that comes out of the reaction to the film, which I think has been a large number of people who see the film and absorb it and find it captivating, is surprise. That so much of what happened in the course of those 8 years, and naturally, is misty and forgotten and long past, particularly because of the enormity of the events of 9/11, I think tend to supersede and have people forget. But the film addresses a large number of issues in some detail, and there are many more that it didn't address, because it's an enormous historical epoch for us in the city. So I think people are surprised to be reminded, to see things framed differently. I think people are, pleased to learn things that they think they forgot or never knew to begin with. So there's an aspect of the film that is educational, as I said, and there's also an element of it that's funny and entertaining too.
You say educational, some people might say political. As Rudy Giuliani gets ready to possibly run for president of the United States, you want to make sure that all this negative stuff about him is at least part of the discussion. Is that accurate?
I think the most important elements of discussion that are important to remember, for instance, are the trampling on the First Amendment. I mean, he eviscerated, totally took away any notion of legality when it came to the First Amendment, whether it was the Brooklyn Museum or Housing Works trying to get permits to demonstrate in front of City Hall. There were, by the time he finished in office, there were 28 court cases, of which we lost and paid for, largely, 26 of them. The record when it comes to the Constitution of the United States was abysmal. I don't think it's wise to not extrapolate from that and worry about what would happen on a national level.
You mentioned the Brooklyn Museum. We'll show a clip of Rudy Giuliani around that issue when he was objecting to some of the art in a particular Brooklyn Museum show and wanted to cut off its public funding. But right now, we'll show another clip from the film that deals with another alleged incident of police brutality, although in this case the cops were acquitted, the Diallo shooting.
We want it now. They target the poorer neighborhood. We don't see the equal right.
I'm sure this was supposed to be a peaceful protest. My man coming out with the pump shotgun looking like he ready to do some physical damage.
Black people don't have no talk. We don't have nobody at all. And Giuliani think it's okay.
People shouldn't take advantage of this incident for their own political reasons. In fact, police shootings were down last year by 18%. The New York City Police Department is the most restrained police department of any large city police department in the country. But in the wake of an incident like this, there's a lot of emotion about it. People have a hard time looking at those facts.
No more, no more!
Last Thursday night, the NYPD Street Crimes Unit committed a street crime.
All right, now let me read you an email we got after the radio show this morning, after we talked a lot about Louima and Diallo. Somebody wrote in, are you aware of how disturbing your Giuliani show is? If 2,000 people less are killed per year, how many people are not dead in 8 years? Are you focusing on how he did not present this in a PC manner. NYC police shoot half as many people as do the police in other cities. You focus on one tragic shooting. What do you say to that email?
Well, let's start with the last first. We don't focus on one tragic shooting. I think we focus on some of the larger issues. For instance, Elliot Spitzer's report that was done immediately afterward, and the hundreds of thousands of
Elliot Spitzer in what capacity at that time?
As Attorney General. He was brought in to do an examination of stop and frisk policies that emanated from the street crime unit, who were responsible for the killing of Emmett Diallo. Hundreds of thousands of false arrests, dismissed arrests. That's important. That's not one shooting. That's a wholesale example of what's known euphemistically as suppression policing, not quality of life policing, but suppression policing. That's the issue we are really addressing here, not just one isolated incident like that. Of course, the ones we didn't bring in, Patrick Dorismond. There were a number of other highly publicized individual killings by the NYPD that were not addressed. But the whole notion of 2,000 fewer killings, you have to break that down. It's anybody that uses PC as an operative notion, please. I mean, it calls into question what motivation here is. 2,000 less people dying violently or murder. Half of those are domestic murders. Police have nothing to do with that. If you break it down as criminologists
you don't think CompStat or the other things that Giuliani and Bratton together, and we'll see a clip of Bratton from the film in a couple of minutes, that they did had more of an impact on crime in New York City than what mayors and police commissioners did elsewhere? Because although the national trend in crime was down during those years, it was down way more in New York City and has stayed down much further. So aren't we doing something as a matter of policy?
Yes, I think that the reduction in crime is in part due to, say, strategies like CompStat. I mean, that was initiated here, and it seems to have been effective enough that it's been continued. But I think there was a kind of, I mean, in Freakonomics, for instance, the recent book of Freakonomics, they bring a factor that no one thought of, for instance, the criminologists, in trying to assess what happened with this dramatic drop in crime. The abortion rate that began in '73, the cohort of young men that weren't born in 1993 when Mayor Giuliani took office. There are a variety of components here. The number of people heroin addicts who died of AIDS, 2,000 to 3,000. There are a number of factors that sort of conjoin into what is kind of like a perfect storm. And that perfect storm accrued to all of our benefit. Crime went down, but there are many component parts of it. And I do not think the most important component part of that was Mayor Giuliani's leadership.
And that's one of the most important points that you're trying to make in the film, is he shouldn't get too much credit for the decline in crime in New York City. Let's see that clip of William Bratton, former police commissioner. He says it in this clip, but keep in mind that he was considering running for mayor himself at this time.
The mayor, coming from a law enforcement background, fully understood that his #1 issue was going to be crime. And so he probably spent a lot more time on that issue than any of his predecessors. And also a great deal was riding on the success in this area. He had campaigned on doing something about crime. He would not be reelected if he did not.
What we don't want to have happen is spending all of our time on revisiting history when there are a million felonies going on in New York City that have to be addressed by the police department.
It's amazing we got as much done as we did, because we don't like each other. We didn't get along. But the mayor consciously set out to break the back of the NYPD, to make it subservient to him. And he succeeded.
So Bratton reminds us, as did Clyde Haberman, the New York Times columnist, in his piece yesterday, that Giuliani has some of the same tendencies as President Bush. So if people don't like the fact that Bush tends to be very secretive, doesn't like the press very much, doesn't give out a lot of what some people think should be public information, Giuliani was like that too as mayor in New York. If they think that Bush doesn't hear a lot of dissenting views from his staff and weighs different kinds of opinions, that was famous to Rudy Giuliani at the time. If they think that people who have any kind of dissent at all get alienated, well, he even alienated his own rock star police commissioner, Bill Bratton.
So that he quit, or we don't know if he quit or if he was fired, but there was a mutual understanding. He left with a smile on his face, apparently, but we don't know what the inner dynamic was about that. But I think that some of the policies that you see common to both President Bush and Mayor Giuliani. For instance, President Bush declared that his father's presidential papers would be archived at the Presidential Library in Texas, so they're not accessible to historians. Well, Mayor Giuliani did the very same thing. He left office with a bunch of Ryder trucks loading all the documents from his administration into the back of Ryder trucks, and for 2.5 years, historians and others, people like yourself, maybe did not have access to them. I think you're right, it's a consolidation of the executive power, the ability to issue executive orders, whether signing statements in Bush's case or executive orders that we don't know about even yet that happened during Mayor Giuliani's. Remember, he was in a position of being Associate Attorney General at the age of 36. That meant he had higher firepower practically, over every part of the Justice Department, from the INS to the alcohol, firearms, tobacco. Mayor Giuliani has been used to handling the levers of power for a long time.
We have people calling in. We have time for a few phone calls. Let's go rapid fire through some. Call us. You see the number on your screen. When you look back on the Giuliani administration, what did Giuliani time mean to you in retrospect? Do you think differently of the mayor today than you did on September 10th, 2001? And as time has gone on, how has your retrospective view of those years changed? 212-251-0801, 212-251-0801. And Doug on the South Shore, you're on the air. Hello, Doug.
Good evening, Brian. How are you?
Good. Real quick, to the point.
Real quick, I agree with the producer there. It's sort of like a Damocles sword. You know, the hagiography that we have of Mr. Giuliani has to be taken into consideration of his top-down management, that basically it was kind of his way or the highway. You know, we seem to tend to be drawn towards these characters that seem to have this kind of Solomon-like type knowledge, they say, usually secretive. They don't want to tell us, and they simply want to tell us, don't be too meddlesome. We don't seem to remember the different parts of that. And the main thing that I see is that he set the template for the police department in which they could start to act in the way in which they have been acted, in which the FBI right now is investigating the Department for the Republican National Convention.
Doug, I'm going to leave it there. Do you give Giuliani credit for the way he handled 9/11?
From what little I know of it, I have not made a study of it. I can tell you that study is coming in the form of a new book by Wayne Barrett that'll be released in the fall. From what I can tell, I know that personally that I was here on September 11th. I saw Mayor Giuliani on television. I was reassured that he was the face of a functioning government. I think all of us were. I think he did maintain a certain composure and a certain steady hand in it. But of course, the other issues about the firemen and the radios, and there are a variety of other issues. I'd like to know why the September 11th Commission didn't ask him any questions.
Leonardo in Queens Village, you're on the air. Hey, Leonardo.
Yeah, Brian, I listen to you every morning, and I get a chance to see what you look like on TV today. My question...
I hope you're not too disappointed. Go ahead.
No, I'm not. What I'm talking about is I want to know, after all this long time, what did Giuliani did so great after 9/11 that everybody's talking about that no other person in that position would not have done? What have you done? Tell me, please. I want to know.
Well, you were just articulating some of what he got credit for, which was that he was a reassuring voice. He probably had a tone that maybe not every leader in government would have had, that both reassured and seemed to defy the terrorists at the same time while comforting people in ways they need to be. I mean, his critics say this is the job that he was always prepared for, to be the hall monitor in an emergency.
Well, he from plane crashes to fires to bursting steam pipes. He was at many disaster scenes. I mean, there were many rehearsals for this. But look, the reactions range from Reverend Sharpton's, even Bozo the clown could have done what he did, to those I've talked to people who felt their lives were changed. Their understanding of what they felt about Mayor Giuliani up to September 11th were changed deeply by his behavior.
Let's watch one more clip from the film. I said we were going to see the mayor's famous reaction to the Chris O'Feely paintings of the Virgin Mary. Do you remember that? An artist who works in dung. He said that the point was to show how society is flinging dung on the Virgin Mary, but the mayor took it very differently. Let's see.
In the Brooklyn Museum case, it's quite extraordinary, really. He made it clear, I am punishing the Brooklyn Museum because I don't like that art.
If this is what the Brooklyn Museum wants to do, present nude men, they have a photograph of pedophiles, they have dead animals, and all kinds of disgusting things. Public funds should not be used to support sick demonstrations by people, even if they call themselves artists. The portrait of the Virgin Mary not only has dung being thrown at her, but it has the private parts of women splayed all over the portrait.
So Giuliani wanting to defund the Brooklyn Museum, at least in terms of public funding. We're almost out of time. Are you afraid that this might backfire? I have here a fundraising letter from the draft Giuliani for President committee that's all about your film and says, help fight the inaccuracies in the film, help fight this guy's portrayal to do to Giuliani what Michael Moore did to George Bush in Fahrenheit 9/11. Send money. They're using your film to raise money for the Giuliani
Well, they did
campaign.
the same thing about the film as Giuliani did about the painting. He never saw the painting. He didn't know, for instance, when he said that they were throwing dung at the Virgin Mary, that if you saw it, Brian, it was a very carefully placed, highly lacquered, solidified piece of elephant dung, which is venerated in Africa. The artist was an African Catholic. It was placed on the painting very carefully. He never saw it. He reacted in a way that was outrageous. I'm afraid that would happen on a national level. These folks here are raising money on a film they think is inaccurate, that they never saw. But my attitude is, please tell all your friends, conservative or liberal, please come see the film, draw your own conclusions, but please bring 5 friends. We have to keep the film going. It's at the Sunshine Theater.
Sunshine Theater in Lower Manhattan. Thank you very much for talking about your film with us. Coming up, the new chairman of the City Council Education Committee, Robert Jackson from Washington Heights and Inwood, on parental involvement and cell phones in schools. This is Brian Lehrer Live.
When it comes to continuing education, all stops lead to CUNY. More than 200,000 New Yorkers of all ages in all 5 boroughs are enrolled in CUNY adult education courses. If you're looking for new job skills to enhance your career, start a new career, or if you want to enjoy a class in the arts, sciences, and humanities, then get on the train and come to one of CUNY's 19 campuses. CUNY continuing and professional education programs offer you more opportunities than any other learning institution in New York City. CUNY gives you high-quality instruction at low cost with schedules to meet your busy lifestyle. For more information, call 1-866-344-CUNY or log on to www.cuny.edu/continuinged. Hurry up, don't miss your stop, come to CUNY.
Massive heat waves. Heat waves. Tick. Severe droughts. Tick, tick. Tick, tick, tick. Devastating hurricanes. Tick, 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 tick. Our future is up to you. Tick. Go to fightglobalwarming.com while there's still time.
This is Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30 with a lot of churn in the New York City Council this year thanks to term limits. We have a new chairman of the Education Committee. He is Councilman Robert Jackson of Inwood and Washington Heights, and last week he held what was supposed to be a major hearing on parental involvement in education. It turned into a hearing largely about cell phones in the schools. We will try to talk about both topics now with Councilman Robert Jackson, and if you want to talk education with him, we'll put our phone number up again, 212-251-0801. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Brian. This is my first time on the program.
And tell people a little bit about yourself, first of all. Politicians don't come from nowhere, even politicians. Chairman of the Education Committee don't come from nowhere.
No.
So where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? And how'd you get interested in education issues?
Within 30 seconds.
That's right.
Born and raised in New York City, grew up in Hamilton Heights and the Bronx, all public schools, Benjamin Franklin High School, State University at New Paltz, and back into New York City. 5 years working for the Labor Department as an investigator, 22 years for Labor Union, and now 4.5 years on the City Council.
All right. Now, do you come to the Education Committee chairmanship with any agendas, with any particular goals that you want to accomplish?
Absolutely. The first and foremost is, when I was elected the chair of the Education Committee in January, is to work with the mayor and everyone else, the unions and everyone, on bringing down the money from Albany for CFE, the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, which is the lawsuit where we have a $24 billion court order against the state of New York. And more importantly, what we wanted to get down initially, especially now, was $1.8 billion from the governor and the state legislature in order to continue to build 21 new schools, which would add additional 15,000 seats to our system.
All right. Let me go down some major education issues, and get your takes on them. First, let me again say our lines are open to talk education, New York City public education, with Councilman and Committee Chair Robert Jackson. And how about the cell phones issues? Are there parents out there? Do you want your children to be able to bring cell phones to school, or do you support the mayor's ban? And how about anything else having to do with parental involvement? Teachers, principals, you can call into 212-251-0801. You see it on your screen, 212-251-0801. But first, class size. An activist group called Class Size Matters is trying to get a question on the ballot for November that would force the city to spend enough money to reduce class size down to, I think, 15 or 18, especially in the lower grades. Do you support it?
Absolutely, yes. And in fact, Randy Weingarten, the president of UFT, and myself, as a former parent and as a chair of the Education Committee, we are interveners in that particular lawsuit. And the former deputy mayor under Giuliani, Randy Mastro, is representing us in that particular lawsuit.
Really? Randy Mastro, who was a former deputy mayor under Giuliani?
Yes.
Very big supporter of Giuliani,
yes,
and all the policies that we were talking about in the last segment.
Yes.
He's for smaller class size.
Yes. In fact, he, not his law firm, but he himself, he's representing us in the courtroom himself.
How could we afford it? And how would we have the space? We're bursting at the seams as it is in the public schools. I remember once interviewing William Thompson, who's now the controller, back when he was president of the Board of Education. At that time, the state had just passed a universal pre-K law. And he said, we can't do universal pre-K in New York City because we don't have the seats, we don't have the rooms. So how can we do this?
Well, the question is, how can we not do it? In fact, we have an obligation to do it under the New York State Constitution to provide our children with a sound basic education. And in fact, that's not what's happening in the New York City public school systems now. In fact, when you talk about universal pre-K, Christine Quinn, our speaker right now, has put forward an initiative for full-day pre-K for all 4-year-olds. And the question is, people say, wait a minute, we don't have the resources to do it. We don't have the space. Where there's a will, there's a way, Brian. And I'm telling you that we can find the space and we can find the money for full-day universal pre-K for all 4 years old. And not only that, but as far as all of the seats that we need in the system, there are a lot of space in this city. And all we have to do is have the will and determination to build and put up the money in order to do it.
All right. Your hearing last week was supposed to be about parental involvement in the schools, and we'll get to that. But it got taken over to some degree by the issue of the moment, the obsession of the moment, which always rears its head, I guess, in politics as in the media, and that happens to be the mayor's cell phones ban in schools. What's your position on that?
Well, quite frankly, I'm against the total ban, and what we've said loud and clear, that safety and security is the main issue. This is New York City, the greatest city in the world. Over 8 million people live and work in New York City. We have children traveling an hour and a half from way parts of Queens to Lower Manhattan, from way up in Northeast Bronx to Lower Manhattan. And parents feel that this is a link to their children's safety and security in this great city, especially after 9/11 occurred. So that's very, very important. So yes, the issue came up, but we try to tell people that the hearing it was not on cell phone. The hearing was on parent involvement. And we're scheduled to have a hearing on June 14th if the matter is not resolved on cell phones. But parents say, well, wait a minute. This is the issue of cell phones because we as parents were not consulted at all on this particular matter. We weren't consulted. The city council wasn't consulted. Students were not consulted. That's the whole situation. There's no consultation with parent leaders whatsoever on issues that affect their children.
I, as you know, have a middle school child in the New York City public schools. We have not yet given him a cell phone, but we've been thinking about it for 2 years, specifically as a lifeline in case he needs it. But I also understand the teacher's position, the principal's position, the mayor's position, which is that these things are creating chaos in some of the classrooms, and they say it would be too expensive and too cumbersome and time-consuming to check every cell phone at the door on the way in, which is, I think, the compromise proposal that City Council is considering, and then give it back to each kid. As you know, many of these schools have thousands of kids. So do you think that's actually workable?
Well, that's not the compromise that we want. In fact, I've said to Deputy Mayor Dennis Walcott and Chancellor Joe Klein, I met with them approximately 3.5 weeks ago before the introduction of a law by my colleague Lou Fidler, before the introduction of a resolution by my colleague Letitia James of Brooklyn on this particular issue. I said that we would like to have a policy in place similar to Boston, that students are allowed to have their cell phones, but they must be totally off and must be away, out of sight. And so that's what parents would like to have. And if you look at New York One, you look at other polls from media outlets, the opinion polls are running 2-to-1 in favor of children allowing to have them in the school, but totally turned off.
Let's take some phone calls. Doug on Staten Island, you're on the program. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
I'm in the education system, and I don't want to talk about too much about this thing with the cell phones. There's other things involved, too, play iPods and things of this nature. So it is a problem. There should have been more consultation, but unfortunately this is the way the mayors do it. What I would like to talk about is the smaller class size. Being in the system, I can tell you for a fact that sometimes after these kids get past the 2nd and 3rd grade, the amount of money that's spent remediating these children is just outrageously wasteful. And when you think that later on a lot of these kids end up falling through the system, and we end up incarcerating them at $35,000 to $40,000 a year. From an economic standpoint, nonpartisan, from a just moral and ethical standpoint, it's just foolish not to do that. And when you hear that states are looking at some of their children's populations in early grades, like Texas, they're thinking of building 4 more prisons in the next 6 years, and they're looking at their student populations right now to say, well, how many more will we need?
So you think obviously it's a good investment. He thinks it's a good, and I'm sure you agree.
He's a smart man.
That it's morally the right thing to do, and it's economically the right thing to do.
Without a doubt. I mean, when I was talking to certain individuals, and we talked about the fact that it costs more to incarcerate a teenager than to send that same teenager to Harvard or Yale or Columbia.
Jeff in Chinatown, you're on the air. Hi, Jeff. Jeff, is that you?
Yes, it is.
Hi, you're on the air right now.
Hi.
Go ahead, I'll give you one more chance. Turn off your television. All right, let's see if we can get Jeff straightened out. In the meantime, Joanna in Rego Park, you're on the air. Hey, Joanna.
Yes, I was just glad to hear that they are thinking about having the policy that the children have the phones, but just shut them off. I mean, that makes common sense. If they're only going to be used, God forbid, for an emergency, so the children have them. So just shut them off. It sounds so common sense. But the question I do have for the small class size, when you say that there are spaces in the city, I was just wondering, with all the Catholic schools that are being closed, is there any possibility, since they are closed, it would not be any kind of mixing of religion and the Board of Ed? Are those sites that are being looked at for either rental or buying from the diocese?
It's an interesting question.
Sure. In fact, part of the $1.8 billion that we were bringing down from the state this fiscal year, 2 of the schools in Brooklyn and Senator Marty Golden's districts are going to be former Catholic schools that either we're renting or long-term leasing. So the answer is absolutely yes. Wherever there is space in order to rent or to build a brand new school, the Department of Education with the School Construction Authority will be looking at all of those spaces. It's easier to lease and rather to build, to lease rather than to build. So we're looking at all of those options.
Parental involvement. It was the subject of your hearing last week. What were you actually trying to get at?
No, we were actually trying to get at parental involvement. And the bottom line of a hearing in the morning and a continuation of that hearing in the evening was that parents and advocates in the field feel that the Department of Education's rating or their grade for parent involvement was unsatisfactory or at best needs improvement.
Parent involvement meaning what? A say in how the schools are run? Or reaching out to parents to help them help their kids? What kind of parent involvement?
All of the above, especially When you talk about parent leaders, I'm talking about the Parents Association, President, Vice President, school leadership teams, CPAC, which is Chancellor's Parent Advisory Council, and these are leaders around the city, or the CECs, the Community Education Councils. All of these are elected leaders of the 1.1 million students in New York City. And all of them basically gives the Department of Education a failing grade when it comes to parental involvement, as far as consulting them on programmatic issues and decisions that have to be made. They're saying there's no true consultation. What they do is that they brief them after decisions are already made.
So you're talking about decision-making and governance. Now, I have to tell you, as a parent of actually 2 kids in the city public schools, I feel like my main role with parental involvement is to help support my teachers, help support the principals, make sure my kids are learning, make sure their heads are in the game, that they're focused, rather than try to run the schools and help tell them how to run the schools.
And you're absolutely correct. And that's what a parent is supposed to do. And that's what you're doing, and that's what I did. But when my role is elected as the PA president or as the school board president, which I was, my role is to advocate on behalf of all of the schools. And when you're advocating, the Department of Education really don't particularly care for when you're advocating, especially when your opinions are different than theirs. Then you become the problem. And I've asked the question, why does parent leaders' attitude change from the time that they initially got involved to where they are now the leaders citywide, and where most of them disagree with the Department of Education? I asked that question of you.
All right, we're out of time. In fact, I know you have to go, but you've just begun a 4-year run as chairman of the Education Committee, so I think we'll be speaking many times.
I hope so, Brian.
Thanks a lot, Councilman Jackson.
You're welcome.
Coming up next, we continue our web video series this week, where scary safety videos meet scary car commercials and ninjas for net neutrality. This is Brian Lehrer Live.
Do you want to complete your college degree while balancing career and family obligations? Do you want a flexible schedule and a challenging curriculum? If you've earned at least 30 credits or an associate degree, now's your chance to finish what you started at CUNY. Learn about CUNY's online baccalaureate in communication and culture. Visit cuny.edu/online or call 212-652-CUNY.
This is a story about the living reef, the oldest city on Earth. These wondrous, complex communities are the most diverse places on the planet and are so important that the ocean cannot exist without them. And we cannot exist without the oceans. Unfortunately, pollution and overfishing are destroying the world's coral reefs. We've already lost 25%, and the rest may perish within a generation, unless we act now. Protect the living reef, and we protect the ocean. Protect the ocean, and we protect ourselves.
This is Brian Lehrer Live. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30, and now we continue our series showing newsworthy and viral video from the web. This week, where scary safety videos meet scary car commercials and ninjas for net neutrality. With us as our viewing partner tonight is Aaron Cohen, CEO of Bolt Media, a video-oriented internet company. Welcome, Aaron.
Good to see you.
And our first clips come from the world of advertising. This is from a new ad campaign for the car maker Volkswagen that uses some scare tactics. Now, before you see this, we should say the crash you are about to see is real, but the people in it are stuntmen. Let's watch.
It just gives me the feeling like she's not, listening to me.
Have you tried not saying like every other word?
What?
Remember your ski trip story?
Yeah.
I was, going down the hill, and, this guy, cut me off, and, there was a crowd, and,
come on, that's
and I was like, look, stuff either happens or it doesn't happen. Stuff doesn't sort of happen.
Holy.
Wow. So there are really two questions that I have about this. One, this is scary stuff for a car commercial. Why are they doing it? And two, this has apparently become popular viewing on the web. What's the appeal?
Well, I think the first point is it is a real sign of the changing landscape of the advertising industry that we are discussing in a commercial that was shot by a kind of very well-known ad agency, Crispin Porter, that essentially is being used as, and we're talking about it as web content. And I think the reason that that is happening is because people under 30 don't watch TV very much anymore. And we really have to start admitting to ourselves that television increasingly appears to be a kind of 20th century medium. Something I never would have said even a few years ago.
So it's just American Idol, Anderson Cooper, and web video.
Correct. I mean, and user-generated content per se. But I think I think it's a very effective ad. I think that it gets people talking. But I think the interesting thing about ads today is that they are increasingly becoming entertainment. And I mean, you know, there's an explosion of Ronaldinho. Ronaldinho is the soccer considered
player.
To be the greatest soccer player in the world these days from Brazil. And there's just an astonishing proliferation of his Nike ads all over Bolt and YouTube and places that house a lot of video content.
That was a 32-mile-an-hour head-on real crash, though, as I said, using stuntmen. You call this advertising verite?
Well, I don't know if I'd call it advertising verite. I mean, one of the challenges that this particular ad has is that, you know, this is not a Volvo we're talking about. This is not the safest car on the planet. And, you know, I think they risk, you know, getting exposure there. They are not a particularly, Volkswagen Jetta, I think it is not a particularly safe car. So is a little bit, that I think is a little bit problematic.
And they used apparently the real speed, 32 miles an hour, that they used in federal crash tests.
Correct.
So in that sense, it was kind of, you know, replicating. Though they never tell us that.
There's a level of authenticity. There's no question about it.
All right, let's look at another Jetta ad from the same campaign doing the rounds online. This one was at 18 miles per hour. Let's watch.
Who cried? I did.
Not me.
It was a sad ending and everything. I didn't cry.
With your hand in your chin.
That's called concentrating on the moment.
It's more like holding your quivering upper lip. Exactly.
I wasn't crying, okay? I mean, seriously, I don't know why.
Do you think it's better for the common good that Volkswagen is advertising on the basis of safety rather than, I don't know, the cool iPod that comes standard or the V8 engine or something like that, or don't you want to go there?
Well, I would certainly think it's better for the public good. I would hesitate to say that it's better for Volkswagen. You know, it's very difficult from a branding standpoint to own a bunch of different things. They're simultaneously running, you know, safety ads and speed ads with a different model, the Volkswagen GTI. So, I mean, I think there's a real level of complexity there. What I think is interesting about that ad is the kind of Benetton effect, right? You certainly got a person, you got lots of people of different color. Clearly, they're trying to cast an incredibly wide net. The conversation is, I think, intentionally vanilla. And, you know, I mean, it's kind of trying to have
As
this
a contrast, right. You're doing mundane things,
right.
And if you're not doing what you're supposed to do in terms of the road, you're going to get it. By the way, I don't know how long these have been out, but there was an article in the Washington Post last week that indicated they have not been effective at changing the sales numbers.
Right, and I think I'm glad you brought that up, and I got a chance to read that very same article, and I think it is indicative of this key point. People just don't watch TV as much as they used to. I mean, and if they do, they're really very, very DVR-centric. There was a very
But people are seeing it. I mean, the whole reason we're talking about it on our web video series is that people are apparently watching this on the web out of choice.
No, right. They're watching it. It is a popular video on the web. It's among one of many popular videos. I don't know whether, you know, tens of millions of people have seen this. Maybe 1 million people have seen this. But television ads are bought to lift sales. But if people don't see the ads, well, then it's harder to lift sales. And I think that's one of the problems that Crispin Porter and Volkswagen are facing.
All right. We mentioned that these kinds of shock value ads were new territory for ads here. But these kinds of car crash scenes are nothing new for European TV viewers. Government campaigns to crack down on drunk driving and speeding have made ads much more violent than even these for years. So let's look at one of the more creative ones that we found online, produced in this case by the British government.
I told you, I've already had one. I'm driving, aren't I? And
you'll be fine.
It's only a second.
She's definitely okay.
Yeah, she still is.
No, stay. Hold on. Go on, give it a look. Go on.
It takes less than you might think to become a drink driver.
So if the first ad was wow, that's double wow. They didn't even get to the point of getting in the car where you can almost guess that something like that is coming.
That ad is, you know, in many ways, I think, makes you, you know, proud to be a British citizen. You know,
You think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a very, very effective piece of advertising. I really do, and I think it's enormously creative. And I think the fact that we're talking about it here in New York City points to how borders are breaking down, how it's so easy for these ads to proliferate around the world via the internet. And you know, you find out that Jen Aniston endorses Heineken in Germany, but like we would never have known that in the United States. And you know, celebrities make a ton of money you know, endorsing products in Japan, Germany, London, Europe, all kinds of other places. But now those ads are finding their way into the U.S. market. And again, I think that's because of the proliferation of video-based content on the internet.
Yeah, you know, I'm told by a reliable source, someone from Ireland who works on the staff of this program, that there are even more violent anti-drunk driving PSAs in the UK that show bodies strewn on the road and all this graphic content. Do you think there's a cultural barrier? Is there something that prevents, let's say, the government in this country, which does anti-drunk driving PSAs, from going that far?
You know, I don't know the history of the kind of PSA movement. I'm sure there are conspiracy theorists who would say that the, you know, kind of SUV driving American car companies would not be excited to constantly run very, very violent car commercials. I think what's happening, though, is because advertising is so much less effective than it used to be on television, because fewer people are seeing it, you're seeing people have to take much, much bigger risks, and companies take bigger risks, whether it's Volkswagen or the British government. And I think the result of the ones you've selected here is some very, very powerful marketing.
One more in this vein, another clever British public service announcement, only this one tackles cell phone use while driving. Let's watch.
Think. Switch off before you drive off.
All right. Cell phone. Did we see all of that? The cell phone ads. You know, again, I don't think they've gone that far here. I think the government is a little reluctant about going that far here.
I think that ad, again, you know, and I appreciate you turning me on to these. I actually found these on Bolt as well. And I think that is such
Wait, you didn't know they were on your own site?
Well, no, yeah. I mean, there's literally thousands of videos uploaded to my site on a daily basis, and none of these were in the top, you know, 100 per se.
Can I linger on that point for a minute? It really shows the point that you were trying to make before about how we're entering an era of user-generated content.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you know, I think the thesis is this one, that people under 30, particularly people under 20, are the first generation of people to grow up watching their whole lives on video. You spoke earlier in the show about your children. You've probably experienced that your kids really take great pleasure in watching their soccer games, their birthday parties, their ballet recitals, their graduations. And it turns out when a generation has grown up with ubiquitous video watching themselves, they want to be a part of the content. And increasingly, they are opting out of mainstream media. All the talk in Hollywood these days is that Mission Impossible missed its opening number, you know, by many millions of dollars because Tom Cruise is less popular with women. I think the more likely culprit that nobody's talking about is that, you know, young people increasingly are doing other stuff. They're hanging out on Bolt, they're hanging out on MySpace, they're playing video games, you know, on their Xbox 360. And we live in a vastly different era, and, you know, they like being part of the content.
So I don't know what your business model is at Bolt, but how do you make money if the audience is that diffuse?
Well, let's be clear. We reach 11 million people on a monthly basis at Bolt, and the 11 million are comprised of lots and lots of different people looking at lots and lots of different content. But one of the things I think we really need to respect about this generation is that they seek an audience. They're the most creative generation that has ever lived. The proliferation of devices, the ubiquity of broadband, wireless technologies, having a camera and now a video camera on your phone, these are allowing them to make content at a voracious rate and a prolific rate. And I think what's going on is they are, you know, they seek an audience, and an audience of one is still an audience. And it turns out that we can show a Levi's ad or a Nike ad to lots and lots of small audiences.
Yeah. So if the last generation's relationship with media was defined by being couch potatoes, the most passive thing you could possibly be,
correct,
the new generation's is almost the opposite.
It is. I think the greatest thing that could happen to our, and we're not talking about it, what we're talking about, you know, MySpace is this tremendous cultural force in our society now. And what we're talking about is that there are predators lurking on MySpace. That's not the story. The story is that young people are turning off their TV and they're making content. How great is that for American society and, frankly, global society?
And teens, was it your survey that found that some large percentage of teens couldn't even name the big four TV network, about a quarter of them?
One out of four kids cannot name the big four networks, which is an astonishing, I mean, for me, it was a kind of transformative piece of data. I would have never expected that. And it just points to the fact that you know, life has changed so much. You and I are from a very rare generation of people who watch TV and did not have remote controls. And as a result of that, we know a lot of jingles.
So just, you got to tell me, was it CBS that most of them tended to miss? the old people's network?
Right. You probably make a good point that Idol resonates with more people under 30 than
they know Fox. All right. You could say this next clip also uses shock value in advertising, but of a different type. This is from a Canadian tourism company. Let's watch. I don't think I've ever seen that kind of tourism commercial before. Is this a thing? Is this touting social policies in order to attract tourism? Of course, that's a company that's going to make money by getting gay people to go on their tour package, their wedding tour package, to Canada.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good, hey, you know, they've got a kind of barrier, as long as we've got the, you know, at least the current administration, I think what they've got there is a kind of competitive advantage. You know, they've got some significant, you know, many millions of people in this country who can't accomplish what they want to accomplish in certain states here that they'd like to accomplish there, and a pretty good business model, pretty effective ad.
I guess if the Netherlands, with you know, legal hashish in Amsterdam, can practice narco-tourism, then they can practice homosexuality tourism.
It's certainly a viable business model
in Canada. Let's look right at another creative ad, and this one is about the issue of net neutrality, which we talked about on the show a couple of weeks ago. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I will leave it to this ninja to break it down for you.
Well, I am ninja, he's ninja, she is ninja too. I am ninja, we are ninja, but I believe that you are ninja too.
Ask a Ninja, special delivery, net neutrality. In case you don't know what's going on. Okay, let's just pick somewhere where everybody likes to be. Watching the girl at Hot Dog on a Stick make lemonade. I think we can all agree that's pretty compelling. But then, like, the big internet service provider puts up a wall and says you can't watch the girl at Hot Dog on a Stick make lemonade unless she pays us. Meanwhile, they're trying to make you watch Robin Williams' cousin make bacon juice, and he's got like a mesh shirt on and there's lots of hair. He's like just as hairy as Robin Williams, but not even as funny as Robin Williams is not. He's just squeezing bacon into a cup, and they're like, hey, that's the same as watching the Hot Dog on a Stick girl make lemonade. And you're like, no, it is not. Hello. I want to see the girl in a tri-colored funny hat doing a funny motion that produces something that I like. That's what the internet is all about. People in funny hats making things that people like. When Vince Cerf invented the internet, that was his whole goal. And then the big internet service providers are like, well, we can make a fake version of that. And you're like, can't I just do that? And they're like, well, only if those people give us some fried cheese. And everybody's like, but it's already there. Can I just see it? And they're like, not, well, we have this big wall that's built out of the shredded First Amendment, and they hold it together with glue reed. That's a glue made from greed. But it's not Lou Reed. That guy's pretty cool. Net neutrality, net neutrality. I really need to get some backup singers. Net neutrality, net neutrality.
So without even getting back into the issue, who is that guy and how did he get so good?
That guy is a card-carrying member of the most creative generation that's ever lived, and he has great passion for making art, and he is going to be discovered, and is being discovered as we speak because of his passion and talent, and the internet is a distribution platform.
And we'll play some more from that group in the future. But before we get to our last clip, I should explain a problem those of us who work in live television sometimes run into. When we book a guest for an interview, they often run late, in which case the producer would quickly usher the guest from the reception area straight into the studio. Well, here's what happens when you are in such a rush. You might bring in some guy who was there for a job interview instead of the internet expert who was supposed to be your guest. This is courtesy of the BBC. Let's watch.
The industry and the growth of music online. Well, Guy CUNY is the editor of the technology website News Wireless. Hello, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Were you surprised by this verdict today?
I'm very surprised to see this verdict to come on me, because I was not expecting that. When I came, they told me something else, and I'm coming. You got an interview, so it's a big surprise anyway.
A big surprise.
Exactly.
Yes, yeah. With regards to the cost that's involved, do you think now more people will be downloading?
The poor Beeb, and that guy's faking it. He's, you know, going through the motions. He didn't know what he got himself into, but he was there for a job interview, so he thought, well, I better answer the questions.
Exactly. No one ID'd me, as it turns out, either, and I'm also a cab driver.
Oh, okay. Can you drive me home?
Right.
Aaron, thanks a lot for coming in.
It was fun being here.
And that's it for tonight's show. We're here live Wednesday nights at 7:30 in May and June. Next week, Forest City Ratner's misleading Brooklyn brochure. We will show it to you. And don't forget to check out my daily radio show, weekday mornings at 10 on WNYC New York Public Radio. Tomorrow morning, live coverage and analysis of the confirmation hearings for Michael Hayden to run the CIA. That's on 93.9 FM and AM 820 tomorrow morning at 10. Have a great night. One of the things I did